So Iran has responded to Israel's attack of the Iranian embassy in Syria 2 weeks later by sending hundreds of drones and ballistic missiles to the offending state. Now, this has caused a lot of cause for concern because this may lead to a potential regional war between Iran, its allies, even, and Israel and their allies. But there are some really key points to consider. For those who just don't know what's going on, well, 2 weeks ago, of course, Israel broke the conventions of the Vienna Convention by attacking the embassy of Iran. Now, embassies are treated as just as any soil of the country with which it represents. So naturally, this is a complete acting of impunity and just a complete disregard for Iran's sovereignty. And so Iran had to respond because of the sheer, even at a basic level of their dignity of the nation being insulted by this act that was unprovoked and unprecedented. So Iran responded, but the way they responded was very interesting. When I first heard news of this being broken, as the drones were on their way to Israel, because of course there was a flight path around 5 hours or so, I was thinking, surely Iran must know that these would be easily shot down by the Iron Dome. So for those that don't know, that Israel has a very protective ballistic missile and missile defense system that shoots down rockets entering its airspace, and it's developed with the funding of the US in joint venture. So it's very much a huge asset to the defense capabilities of Israel, and it should have been known by Iran that a lot of these would have been taken down. And, a lot of us already knew that, Bo of the Fifth Column, for example, he talked about how most of these would be taken out, to the point where only, a single percentage of these drones and missiles would actually hit their targets. And lo and behold, they were true. The assumptions were true. And it turns out, when you consider the fact that Iran had already announced the fact 72 hours in advance that they would make this attack, and the fact of the 5-hour flight path of these drones, it was clearly a well calibrated and one that was choreographed attack. In that it was a show of we are responding, but not necessarily in the way of actual force, but more so the morale and the the show of force, rather the fact that we will enter your airspace, we will defend ourselves if necessary. And the fact that they knew that they weren't going to attack as many is quite clear. Just it should be very evident, at least. And it seems to be the case that they were evident because when you consider the fact that there was very, first of all, it was precise targets. Bases, for example, that they intended to hit were hit. The ones, most of the drones did not, obviously hit their targets. Partly it is assumed that because the flurry of drones would kind of keep the defense systems busy, so that the very few that they intended to hit would hit. But in the calculation of this attack, zero civilians were harmed. So clearly this was more of a show of their more military willingness to engage with Israel rather than actually physically harming Israel. So because of course Iran, is an ancient, part of an ancient culture, civilization. They wouldn't go into an all-out war with Israel just willy-nilly. They won't necessarily, they would. Um, right now, we are at a stage where it's more like a show of, like a bit like chimpanzees. You can talk about this in evolutionary terms. Chimpanzees beating on their chest and showing that they're willing to go to the next level if necessary. But here's the thing. Here's a big but. Israel wants to divert its attention away from what's happening in Gaza. It wants the world and media and the politicians' attention to be on Israel as and frame the situation as Israel defending itself. In fact, there are news articles actually referring to this unprovoked attack or a dangerous escalation. Now, why would you consider not the attack on the embassy as a dangerous, reckless, escalation when more people had died in the attack on the embassy as opposed to this attack right now? And it's common sense to make the assessment that Iran had not actually sent those drones with the intention of doing maximum damage, because they knew that these are slow moving drones, relatively speaking, slow moving missiles. They take 5 hours to travel. So it's ridiculous to say that this is completely, although it is unprecedented because this is the first time Iran has directly shown force, they are also sending a message. Here's also another very important thing. US has 2 weeks ago, after the attack on the Iranian consulate, on the embassy, US has decided to not be part of the retaliation if, for example, Iran were to attack. This goes to show that the US does not want to, escalate a certain conflict that Israel is being much too willing and much too belligerent to escalate. Because, of course, the leader of Israel, of course, Benjamin Netanyahu, it's in his interest to escalate the situation and to prolong and protract the wars, for example, on Gaza, and also, not that it's a war, it's a genocide, and also to prolong and to initiate new wars. Because, of course, if he were to be voted out of power, if there were general elections, of course, it would not be the right time during a war. But if there were, following the conclusion of a war, he would be voted out, and obviously considering he is being charged for corruption charges, he may face jail time. So it's in his interest to prolong the war. So this is the state of affairs right now with Benjamin Netanyahu. It's in his personal best interest, or not best interest, but in his personal interest, self-interest, to prolong the war. So there are certain elements at play. The US doesn't want to escalate. Israel wants to escalate through Benjamin Netanyahu and other right-wing leaders within the country. And how Israel responds will be quite important for determining whether this will be a regional war or even potentially a world war situation. We're hearing all kinds of hyperbolic statements made by Israel. Iran will exact a price. No, but what's interesting is that there are some messages out there that give potential hope. For example, President Herzog says what Iran did was completely, reckless, but we do seek peace, which may be kind of a cause for, being calm about the situation, because obviously when a lot of us heard about this, we thought this potentially World War III, but it all hangs in a balance. The real issue here is that when the attack on the embassy happened, the US did not step back, but it did not act like the moral arbiters that it should have. It should have acted as the headmaster between these two, children, fighting, basically. Of course, Israel always being the bully, obviously, and the genociding bully. It should have been, okay, we condemn this action. Let's de-escalate. Iran was watching what's happening, and they didn't see any condemnation of the attack on their embassy, and so Iran had to show some, might. Not that I condone how they showed it, but it's a natural response to their dignity being violated in this way through the attack on their embassy. So this is where we are. This is the state of affairs right now, and this plays into both the situation on the ground in Iran, where there's political instability. A lot of people are not happy with the Islamic Republic of Iran with their crackdown on women's rights. People are not happy with Netanyahu. And what may be obscured right now is the 1.7 million people in Rafah who may be facing the threat of a ground invasion. Because what's happening right now is, just as the previous large-scale wars, when there is some huge regional conflict, that is often used as a ruse, as the cover to commit more atrocities, which may mean the ground invasion of Gaza may be initiated to the suffering of hundreds of thousands of people. When there is a war, obviously it gives a cover, just as the Third Reich Nazis were given cover by World War II to send millions of Jews, of Gypsies, of LGBTQ people, or disabled people, to the gas chambers and kill them. It was under the cover of war that the most heinous atrocities are committed, and so it seems like any regional escalation between Israel and Iran may prove to be the most fatal for those living in Rafah or temporarily located in Rafah. But yeah, I'll be continuing these updates. It's not looking promising for the world, and also the US, the so-called moral, the one that is holding the hegemon, what we consider to be the so-called good guys, which is deeply ironic considering that of all vast majority of wars that the US has been involved in the last several decades have been on the basis of falsehood and led to hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of civilians being killed, like the Iraq War, the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, and also which led to the rise of ISIS. I mean, and also the US and their support of Israel, ironclad support. It's such a dogmatic state of affairs, and it's such a knee-jerk reaction when you look what's happening right now. The contravention of Vienna Convention in terms of attack on the embassy, and the contravention of the Geneva Convention, which is basically the genocide that's happening on the Palestinian people, is not in line with humanitarian law. And despite what some, the politicians and the mainstream media are saying, that Iraq was reckless in their sending of drones, it was not in contravention of international law. It's permissible within international law to respond to a violation of your soil.